Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, 7 Emerging Trends Shaping Compliance Technology in 2023. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Please note, all participants except the panelists are muted. However, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can put it in the Q&A box. And if you experience any issues like audio things or there's delay in slide advancements, feel free to let us know by using the chat box. And lastly, we will be sending a link to the recording and the slides tomorrow. So please look out for that in your inbox. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to quickly also introduce ClauseMatch, who are hosting today's webinar. So we are an award-winning regulatory technology company. We help companies mitigate risk and manage compliance across the policy management lifecycle. Here are just some of our clients listed here, but we support global clients across Tier 1 banks, fintechs, payments, and insurance organizations. And we're also a global organization. We have offices across the US, Europe, and Asia. So that's just a little bit about ClauseMatch. So for today's agenda, we're going to start by just sharing a couple of snippets from our recent compliance technology survey. Then we're going to dive into the meat of the discussion and talk through the 7 emerging trends shaping compliance technology this year. And then instead of doing a traditional Q&A, we're going to ask that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box while the presenter is speaking. So for example, in the first trend, Kieran's going to be talking about AI. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box at that time. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it off to today's moderator and my colleague, Sarah Beckman, our PR executive at ClauseMatch. Take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm excited to be kicking off today's webinar. We have a great group of panelists you can see on your screen. Some of them are from our team at ClauseMatch, and we also have folks from other global reg techs and financial institutions. Thanks all for joining. I'm going to have them introduce themselves during their discussion in a little bit. Before we kick it off to our panelists, I'm going to go quickly through some of the results from our recent compliance technology survey. So the first slide here is the top compliance priorities that people gave us in 2023. We found that when it comes to compliance priorities, investing in compliance technology is the #1 focus area for organizations, as well as communicating policies to stay and drive adherence. The responses, as you can see, highlight the variety of challenges companies face at the moment to stay compliant as we see the unstable business and economic landscape. Also, according to our survey, even with the economic downturn that we're likely going to experience this year, 41% of compliance professionals said they were confident their compliance tech budgets would actually go up. And an additional 42% said that they would remain the same. So that's actually pretty positive news. Also, when it comes to compliance technology investment, the top compliance tech area survey respondents said they're looking to invest in compliance monitoring, risk management, and reg change management. And we want to highlight here that it's important to understand there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this. Each company will be at a different stage in their compliance maturity journey. Now, we're going to get into the heart of our webinar. What are the 7 emerging trends for compliance tech this year? Each of our speakers today is going to talk through their topics. As you can see, we're going to cover everything from AI, crypto, trust, and more. And the first trend will be with Kieran LeBlanc, a senior product manager at ClauseMatch, talking about the role of artificial intelligence in compliance tech. Kieran?
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kieran, a PM here at ClauseMatch, and I'll be talking about artificial intelligence today. And today I'd like to put forward the idea that this year we'll see vastly increased innovation in the use of artificial intelligence for compliance. I'll first say a bit about the impact AI is having on business in general, and then we'll move on to consider its impact on compliance in particular. So starting with AI in business in general, there are a number of enabling factors or developments that have happened over the past decade or so, which have made it possible for businesses to profitably adopt the technology. The first is that AI capabilities are improving really fast. To give a few examples, in 2015, the winner of the ImageNet Challenge competition showed that AI can outperform humans in some tests of image recognition. Then in 2016, we saw AlphaGo defeat the world's Go champion by watching and learning human gameplay as it went. And this is, you can contrast this with what happened with the more rudimentary Deep Blue supercomputer when it won chess against Garry Kasparov in '97. That computer essentially brute forced the problem. It calculated every possible route instead of learning about gameplay as it went. Finally, in 2020, the GPT-3 language model, which underpins ChatGPT, came out. That's from OpenAI, and that generates very high quality text responses to almost any question you can throw at it. In fact, they're so high quality that they're almost indistinguishable from human responses most of the time. The second enabling factor is cloud computing. So that means that many, even very small organizations have access to really huge computing power for cheap. The third, individuals and companies are sharing more and more open source information, and that includes both the data sets that you need to train an AI model and also the AI algorithms and the models themselves. Finally, then, public awareness of the capabilities is leading to increased generation of ideas about how they can be used to solve business problems. We've all seen what ChatGPT can do. So as a result of all this, organizations are increasingly adopting AI to solve a wide range of problems. A statistic for you, McKinsey found in their 2022 AI adoption survey that the average number of AI capabilities, for example, natural language processing and knowledge graphs, that an organization uses doubled from 2018 to 2022. So moving on then to look at the impact of AI on compliance in particular. In the last slide, we looked at enabling factors allowing profitable adoption of AI, but as well as carrots, there's also a stick when it comes to compliance, which is that an increasingly demanding regulatory environment is actually forcing businesses to handle more data than they ever have. And really the whole legal and regulatory apparatus comes to bear here. So first, regulators are demanding more transparency. That means a lot more reporting requirements. So for example, in 2014, we had the EU's MiFID II demanding unprecedented transparency around financial reporting. And more recently in 2022, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive came out, and that's actually just come into force. And that does for sustainability reporting what MiFID did for financial reporting. So second, then prosecutors are more willing to investigate and prosecute breaches. So over in the US, for example, where no doubt some of you are joining from, the Department of Justice has made it easier to bring prosecutions for non-compliance. In their June 2020 guidance, they say that organizations must give staff continuous access to data about actions by both internal and third parties. So what this means is that where historically organizations could get off the hook with the so-called needle in a haystack defense, In other words, they could say we just didn't have the data or we didn't have the analytical capabilities to understand the data to spot breaches. That's just no longer the case. Finally, courts are imposing higher fines where breaches are found to have occurred. For example, the average fine under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in 2010 was just a few $1 million, but by 2019, that had ballooned to about 135 million. So where does AI come in then? Well, AI can help organizations meet these increasing demands by allowing them to draw valuable insights from vast quantities of data in a very efficient and accurate way. And we can see that many financial institutions are already using AI to really good effect for a number of use cases like credit risk modeling and fraud detection and surveillance of conduct breaches and market abuse in trading. So putting the regulatory question to one side, businesses adopting AI actually stand to benefit. Their bottom line stand to benefit in the end because this data they're collecting and the analytical capabilities they bring to bear on it can actually show up risks in real time that they might have not otherwise spotted, or they might have spotted slower, and that allows them to act quickly and mitigate those risks and save money. And by extension, businesses failing to do that risk putting themselves at a competitive disadvantage. So just to bring a bit of color to all this, I wanted to say that at ClauseMatch, we're taking advantage of AI in a number of ways. One example of a problem that we've helped solve for clients is helping them manage the vast quantities of content, the regulations, the policies, the procedures that they store in ClauseMatch. So for several years, we've had a tool that helps clients flag connections between content in ClauseMatch. But more recently, we identified that we could actually supercharge that tool by adding AI capabilities. And what that tool does is it scans content and it suggests connections, which a human can then confirm or reject. And this can help in several ways. For example, it can help a policy owner, for instance, spot duplications so they can reduce the number of documents they need to manage. It can also help them spot contradictions so that they can improve consistency between their policies and procedures. So the bottom line is that it saves them a lot of time and effort. And like many companies, we're just getting started. So in this year and in the future, we'll continue to innovate with AI to solve more client problems. So that's all I've got for today. Maybe we have time for one question, if you've got any.
We're running a little bit short, Kieran, but there is a question in the chat box if you want to address that independently. But I'm going to move on to the next trend. Thanks, Kieran, so much. Let's bring in Jelaine Bauer with Ascent RegTech for our next trend, managing regulatory change. Jelaine?
Good morning. And good morning from the United States, Silicon Valley of the 1890s. If you look out my window, if you can see that far, you'll see that it's snowing. Now, hint, if you don't know where I am, think steam shovels, dredging equipment used to build the Panama Canal, and engines that powered everything from cars, trucks, mowers to motorcycles. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My name is Jelaine Bauer, and some 6 years ago, I pivoted from a 30-year career in regulatory compliance and took a job in fintech, running reg change management projects for the wealth business of a global provider of financial market data and infrastructure. 2 years ago, I bypassed my retirement and took a job in the emerging world of RegTech here at Ascent Technologies. Here, I'm responsible for monitoring reg changes globally, structuring our regulatory data, preparing scopes of work for clients, and supporting our sales, marketing, and customer success teams. Ascent clients use our including our clients through partners like ClauseMatch, use our cutting edge software to make regulatory knowledge intelligent. Now, although I now work in the Silicon Valley of the 1890s, I was actually born in the Wild West. Now, hint again, think Badlands, made famous by 26th Rough Rider president. See, you're getting a lesson in US history as a bonus here. Teddy Roosevelt, who had a ranch there. And more recently, our Badlands were known for its oil fields. Now, if you're guessing Texas, wrong again, North Dakota. Now, the point I want to make with my backstory is how it feels to face the 2023 compliance trends that I will be discussing. In the words of a guy recently running for political office, quoting one of America's famous country music singers, at my age, I'd like to be able to say this ain't my first rodeo, but this is my first rodeo. So the first trend I'd like to talk about is learning how to manage reg change, how we need to learn to do things differently. But before I do, I want to describe what I think our environment looks like. First, well, what we face. First, our regulatory environment. We work in an age of accelerating speed and growing complexity, no matter our industry, no matter our function. Turbulence and disruption are constants. Our regulatory parameters. Regulatory parameters are rapidly changing and expanding, and they're not always in sync with financial innovation. Think digital assets, decentralized finance, open banking. Third, the response of our regulators. It doesn't matter where you live around the world. Regulatory responses are often non-uniform in timing and approach across jurisdictions and within jurisdictions. And sometimes they're incongruent with our current regulatory frameworks, with distinctly different elements and no basis for comparison. So in 2023, I believe successful compliance practitioners and our business organizations must rethink regulatory change management. We must turn to digital technology to address these challenges and remain competitive. Now, what do I mean by digital technologies? They're the electronic tools, the systems, the devices, the resources that generate and store and process the information we need by converting it to data, also known as numbers. Just like our earlier generations before us transitioned from typewriters and carbon paper and copiers to desktops and computers, we now need to convert to digital technologies, and that requires us to change how we think and work. It's no longer good enough just to identify the regulatory requirements, determine what your obligations are, and map them to our controls, processes, and procedures, as if that wasn't enough. But indeed, we also must make sure that all the necessary information is converted accurately and completely to data used in the compliance technology tools we increasingly depend on. Now, the one thing I'd like to stop here and emphasize is today in reg change management or any project plan that involves regulatory obligations, technical documentation must be part of the plan. Now, what do I mean by this? Technical documentation is referencing, it describes the application, the purpose, the creation, and the architecture of the change we're trying to make and the software solutions we're using to implement it. Typically, this is going to be authored by data scientists, architects, maybe software engineers, quality assurance analysts, but it absolutely must be reviewed, if not authored, by our compliance and regulatory SMEs. It's critical, this documentation is critical for troubleshooting problems and ensuring that your reg change is implemented cost effectively and correctly. This is especially critical as regulators start to digitize our regulations. They will be very specific in terms of telling you when you do regulatory reporting, what fields you have to have, how many values can go into that field. So it requires a lot of thinking and coordination with our technology teams. Technical documentation is relied upon by everybody, your software users, your developers, your testers, your auditors, And don't forget, it's reviewed by your regulatory examiners. Here in the United States, used to be my job to monitor enforcement actions and to quantify the fines attributable to data deficiencies. It's an important reference document as well for your future projects. So in short, these are critical documents, and to give you some examples, if you're not familiar with them, statements of work. This is sometimes where you can be most valuable, describing the problem you're trying to solve, having a discussion around it, make sure it contains the necessary details so that can be taken and used by your technologist to develop scopes of work. These often are done by project managers. They include the details of the project, the deliverables, the timelines, the milestones, the project progress reports, and testing. And this has nothing to do with documentation found in your traditional compliance policies and procedures. This relates to your technology solution. Then beyond the scope of work, they take that and they work to develop the tech specs. Keep in mind that in addition to your tech specs, sometimes and increasingly regulators are issuing tech specs for certain types of reg changes. You need to analyze those, preferably before the rules are finalized, provide input on that, and then that has to be incorporated into your tech specs. And the final thing is user guides. The third trend, or the next trend I'd like to talk about, which is related, is how we make data intelligent. So growing up in North Dakota, Williston Basin, I believe data is like oil. It has little value without the necessary structure, infrastructure to extract, transport, and refine it. And the workers, importantly, possessing the necessary knowledge, qualifications, and skills to manage it. So some quick observations about making your data intelligent, including, if this applies to all data, but here are regulatory data. First of all, data is as an asset. An organization's value is increasingly measured more by its data than by its brick and mortar assets in today's digital economy. Second, data's value is in its intelligence. And what I mean by that is data is worthless unless you can extract useful knowledge and actionable insights from it. In other words, plain spoken, garbage in, garbage out. Turning data into intelligence depends on our human experts. To leverage the power of your software tools today, data it uses must be relevant, clean, and properly structured. And this is the job of humans like you and me and the technologists, not only in our organizations, but in the vendor organizations we rely on. So what are some of the steps you can take to ensure that your data is intelligent? First, develop use cases for your data. These are your guide stars for measuring whether you are generating the intelligence you want. Second, make sure you are capturing data from relevant and authoritative sources, filtering out information that is inaccurate, duplicative, irrelevant, and outside scope. Third, make sure everybody is speaking the same language. People used to make fun of my glossaries, but they were incredibly important to make sure that people understood that sometimes terms can have same term, different meaning in different contexts, different terms, same meaning. And this is critical if you're working across jurisdictions. And fourth, use taxonomies and ontologies to structure your data. Talk to your tech people to understand how to use these. So to sum it up, reg change management and making data intelligent is hard. So equip yourself with the essentials of a blue ribbon rodeo rider. Stay on top, help stay on top of your Bronco. Agility, flexibility, adaptability, quick thinking, fearlessness, and mental toughness.
Love it. I love the references. Thanks for the quick history lesson, Jelaine. Okay, now I'm going to bring in my CloseMatch colleague, Raul Kamlani, who is a senior product manager with us. The next trend he's going to share is what everybody is talking about lately. It is crypto. Raul?
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everyone. Yeah, product manager at ClauseMatch. I've been here for just over a year. Prior to ClauseMatch, I have 5 years experience working in Reg C solutions. So yes, everybody's talking about crypto right now, probably not for the best reasons, but I'll jump straight into it. The cryptocurrency industry is relatively new. It's rapidly evolving, and you could almost say we're still in the Wild West of the crypto industry, although it is maturing over the years. And due to the uncertainties and the changes in the industry, we find that governments, financial regulators, they're often slow to catch on to these trends, but they are trying to increase their regulatory scrutiny by paying more attention to these cryptocurrency trends and try to take steps to put some oversight and regulation into this industry. That leads on to AML and KYC requirements. One of the use cases of crypto, as I'll get into as an example of privacy coin, is that you can make anonymous, you can make transactions as an anonymous user, and that often poses challenges with cryptocurrency exchanges, as they need to provide strong AML and KYC practices to identify and verify who they're onboarding and who's transacting in the ecosystem, which leads on to taxation, because at the moment, due to the slow adaptation governments, regulatory bodies are having to the cryptocurrency industry, it's often hard for them to identify any taxable gains due to cryptocurrency activity, and it's definitely an area that governments are starting to take a closer look into to see how they can tax any cryptocurrency related transactions and investments. Security is a major concern as cryptocurrency is becoming more widespread. We are seeing more hacks in terms of individual hacks targeted at individuals, individual wallets, or exchanges as a whole. But not just hacks, we also have security concerns with a lot of crypto scams going around. You may have heard unfortunate stories about people clicking malicious links that basically empties their personal crypto wallets. So it's hacks, but also scams in the form of primarily malicious URL links that cannot be distinguishable from a standard reputable website. And DeFi is a major trend where, as it's becoming more popular, there are licensing, registration requirements, capital allocation requirements, which governments are still trying to understand. And privacy coin is an interesting one because privacy coin was actually designed to protect the privacy of the user and their transactions. We can think of a privacy coin as a blockchain which records when coins are withdrawn, when they're deposited, but how the coins are used after withdrawal is kept private. So crypto users tend to use privacy coins when they're looking to hide their activity or their transactions. And there are legitimate use cases for keeping your financial transactions private. Say a business owner uses blockchain for financial transaction with vendors. Without privacy, their balance could be available to competitors, and they could increase or manipulate prices based on the publicly available information. Some countries have already taken steps to ban privacy coins, South Korea, Australia, Japan, to name a few, but they are struggling to enforce those bans just due to the nature of cryptocurrencies. So the above trends are definitely driving the need for sophisticated compliance systems for cryptocurrency exchanges to meet the growing regulatory requirements from governments across the world. One example of compliance systems that are being developed to monitor transactions are enhanced KYC and AML compliance systems to ensure that you're onboarding people which have no criminal record or are not into crypto for fraudulent reasons, to give an example. But additionally, blockchain technology is also being used to create more secure and transparent compliance systems for various industries. Smart contracts is one way of doing this. There are also other blockchain-based systems that can essentially automate compliance processes, making them more efficient and less prone to human error. The advantage of using smart contracts is that they provide an immutable record of compliance-related transactions, which can be then used for auditing and regulatory purposes. That's the key message I wanted to present in terms of trends and two major ways that the cryptocurrency is coping and addressing with these trends. Happy to take on the question if there is any time.
Yeah, Rahul, thank you. We did get one from Pranab Satkar. Do you think that central bank issued digital currencies will raise the general standards of compliance in the cryptocurrencies?
Definitely. Central banks, I think, from my perspective, I think that there is definitely a need for a centrally driven regulation in the cryptocurrency industry, because having decentralized regulation often leads to the issues that we raised above around not knowing your customer, identifying where the funds are coming from, where they're going to. So having centralized regulation is key. But I think more than regulation, and maybe just to touch a bit on the developments going on within the cryptocurrency arena, technology can be leveraged to enforce these regulations. So smart contracts, for example, smart contract is essentially a set of code with rules that need to be enforced for a certain action to take place. So you can build a smart contract that can automate compliance processes by using blockchain technology. You can write a smart contract programmed to only trigger when certain regulations are complied with, or when certain AML and KYC requirements are met. So I think there needs to be a balance between centralized regulation, but also leveraging the blockchain technology itself to, with the case of smart contracts, enforce these rules. But yeah, I guess a bit of both between tech and regulation.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rahul, for that trend. Okay, we're going to move on to trend number 5. This one is brought to us with Una Vandenberg, Managing Director of Virtual Risk Solutions. She's going to join us to talk about holistic compliance and business systems driving compliance tech trends this year. Una?
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing? And hello to everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Una van den Berg. Everything you need to know you can find on LinkedIn. I like to overshare. Today I'm going to be talking about integrated and holistic kind of compliance, risk systems and business systems. One of the things I would say is I think it's important that we have unpopular opinions and we don't always agree. I don't agree with some of the earlier statements that have been made in today's presentation. A couple of them around, for example, AI adoption, that links in very closely to what I'm going to be talking about today. One of the biggest challenges that we have in compliance is the lack of automation, and that speaks for itself. Our transaction monitoring systems are on average between 2 to 8% effective, and those statistics are quite well known within the industry and by regulators, but yet we adopt these systems because it's a regulatory requirement. And one of the challenges we have is that we're not proactively identifying risk, but we are managing known risks. And this will continue to allow the financial system to be used by perpetrators who want to commit financial related crimes. In addition to that, compliance is becoming an increasing cost around the globe. A lot of money has been spent in particular on resourcing to support backlogs. Transaction monitoring system speaks for itself, and also ineffective KYC systems. So what are we doing wrong? What can we learn and what can we do better? I think the problem in traditional banking stems from the fact that systems have been built from a siloed perspective. Compliance itself has been seen as a siloed department, and that has been built on the back of up and coming regulation. So every time a new regulation comes in, there's an addition to a policy, a procedure is amended, a new system is implemented. But importantly, those systems don't necessarily speak to each other. Systems have been adopted and integrated for the purpose of which they need to be used at that moment in time. What was never explored was the holistic capabilities of those systems. In addition to that, as I've mentioned, when new regulation develops, we add on to existing processes. What we don't necessarily do is take a step back and say, okay, holistically, is there anything we can do to better streamline the process that we have within the organization? And what that has created is multiple procedures that, for example, KYC client onboarding. I saw one instance where there were 72 steps that a client had to go through in the internal process before they could be onboarded. Like, that is insanity, but that is a perfect example of where these procedures coupled with changing regulation can get out of control. And why does that happen? It happens for a number of reasons. One, I've mentioned, because there's a real lack of understanding of creating holistic compliance procedures. There's also an inability of compliance officers to stop and think because the work never ceases. Risks continue to develop daily in some instances. Firefighting has become a part of BAU, but also, really importantly, we don't necessarily have the knowledge of the business, of the products, and of the operating systems within compliance that can look holistically at how we can streamline processes. So we've ended up with standalone compliance frameworks that some people have said become business prevention. So what can we do better and what can we learn? One comment that was made here by Raul, I'm not calling out Raul, but you mentioned that crypto could still be seen as the wild, wild west. I personally disagree with that comment, and I disagree fundamentally for one reason. We will always have bad actors. We have bad actors in traditional banking. Fines, enforcement actions don't stop. And the same happens in the crypto space. There's no difference. There will always be bad actors. But one thing that crypto has done, which has been transformative, is innovation. Innovation in how we look at implementing controls and also risk mitigation. If you look at the crypto space, the lack of regulation by some is seen as a negative. But for me, and I've been in the industry now over 22 years, when I stepped into the crypto space, I suddenly caught my breath and realized we have really been doing this all wrong. What is holistic risk mitigation? Holistic risk mitigation does not start with the regulatory rulebook. It starts with the risks embedded within your business, which are as a result of many aspects: geographic operations, your products, your clients, your services, all of these aspects. And once you've identified the risks that present it as at today, you can then begin to build your risk framework. And as regulation develops around that, regulation for me is a nice to have to reaffirm that you're doing the right thing. Regulation is only there, in my view, because we do get it wrong. So we do need somebody to say, guys, to create a level playing field and to protect the industry, this is the way we need to do it best. So we need to go back to basics. We need to break down our entire compliance frameworks, starting with our products, our services, where we operate, our client base, look at our risks today, look at the compliance framework that has been built, ask yourself, what risks do we have? What risks are we trying to prevent? Or what I say prevent, to mitigate, because you will never stop risk. And really, really importantly, what is our risk appetite? Because any banking, traditional banking, crypto, any type of financial service carries risk. So building that risk framework holistically starts at a core of understanding the business and understanding how all of the systems that exist, what they do, where your sources of truth are within your data, and then building up data analytics, because compliance today isn't about legal, it isn't about accounting, which is the traditional kind of skill set of compliance officers. It's about data analytics. And that is the only way we're going to begin to be able to move forward, one, to automation, and two, eventually to the use of AI. But we can't jump from today to AI because of a number of reasons. As I've mentioned, we don't have one source of the truth. We have multiple systems operating in silos, which have been implemented at a point in time for a specific usage. We have some institutions running on code that's between 25 to 30 years old. That's not going to translate to emerging and developing an innovative technology today. And thirdly, we haven't really understood how our systems are going to speak to each other to extract data and to proactively identify risk. What do we need to get there? I think the first thing that's very important is there needs to be a cultural and mindset shift within organizations. And that comes down to, what is it that we're trying to achieve with our framework? Instead of throwing money at it, instead of looking when we get it wrong, of, if there's a crack in the wall, if we plaster it over and another one appears, it's not the wall that's broken, it's the foundation. You need to go back to the foundation of your framework, understand what risks you are trying to mitigate, and then look holistically at your controls. And the great thing, and one of the things that we don't talk about, it's seen at this forbidden discussion, is once you've identified how to proactively identify risk, you can also proactively identify customer changes. And those customer changes allow us to identify very quickly potentially cross-selling opportunities. Our clients' behaviors are changing, their appetite for investment, their appetite for products is changing. So how can we better service our clients? How can we preempt what our clients need to support them through the trajectory of their life cycle? And that is what people are looking for from their banking partner. They're looking for a support through their development, through the trajectory of their business development, of their life cycle. And that is where compliance and the business and the operating system all needs to integrate and work hand in hand. I hope, Sarah, I didn't go off on on my kind of soapbox tangent there.
No, you're good. Very interesting points. And we appreciate those insights, Una, very much. Okay, for the sake of time, we're going to go to our next trend. It's number 6. And we're going to talk about internal bots. Sarah Rose Perry, head of compliance for Octopus Investments, is tackling the next trend shaping compliance technology in 2023. I'll pass it on to the other Sarah.
That's super. Thank you very much, Sarah. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Ooh.
ma'am, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Perfect. So I completely agree with what Una said. Definitely data is really key to all of this. But also I think you've hit the nail on the head about culture, about getting the right culture, and that's all about people. And what I see more and more today is that when a company's got the right culture, it's people often want to do the right thing. And sometimes they just don't know. And so they try and approach compliance, but there's only so many people within compliance and so many resources available to them now. What I've seen kind of like rising up is the use of internal bots. And these could be ranging from a law firm which has created some sort of question and answer portal, which allows people to answer questions. Let's say they want to know, can I go and promote this new product within, I don't know, within Germany? And with all of like the reverse solicitation requirements or required, that person will need quite bespoke responses for that to make sure that they're doing it safely for their firm. So there are two angles actually these bots are coming from. One is the generic one from someone like a law firm, but the other ones are being built internally, and those are the ones that I really like. And that's because every firm is built slightly differently, different regulatory permissions, with different products, with different ways of getting those products approved, with different people being responsible for particular elements of either selling that product or making sure that product's appropriately reported. So when a question comes from someone internally, it is quite specific to their firm and their firm's policies. So I think that as firms want to grow, they need to make sure that they're able to service all of the people who want to do the right thing and give them access to answers that they can get when they need it in a timely manner and in an accurate manner. So what I've seen certain technology providers do is partner with compliance teams in order to create these wonderful bots. And it's not about dehumanizing the process, because when you want to have like a sounding board from compliance for a more kind of technical subject, by having these bots in place, it allows them to free up their compliance team's time so that they can work on these higher value items, which will require like drawing out, brainstorming, whiteboards, the stuff that I love, quite frankly. And it will like prevent the same kind of repetitive questions coming up, like, can I conduct a PA deal in, I don't know, this particular security? So where there's kind of repetitive questions, these could all be then offered by bots within companies to keep people safe. There is always the danger of the bot answering the wrong question. And so, yes, it's very much also about teaching people to phrase things in the correct way. But I think that was also where it potentially partners with AI. Use of natural language, what do people want, and how they ask things as well. And as time progresses, these responses will be different. The way people answer questions will be different. But I think that there is a real big potential for internal bots to help elevate the compliance team and help create less friction for people internally.
Sarah, with that, when we're talking about internal bots, you know, the common question that I think we hear a lot from people is, will these things eventually replace the work of humans? What's your take on that?
I think absolutely not. The wonderful thing, the reason why I got into compliance, and I know this is going slightly off tangent, is because it's constantly challenging me and stretching me, because the regulations change, the products that we're working with changes. So you couldn't have a bot which would be so smart that it'll be able to interpret what the FCA is saying in their papers, because it needs that kind of smart human level to interpret regulatory texts for how it's befitting to your business model. So all of this kind of high value kind of knowledge and depicting and data analytics, I think will reside with the person, but it means that the kind of general, more junior tasks, such as the repetitive questions or the logging, all that type of activity can be done by the bot. And I think that also it means that juniors within compliance teams will have a more fulfilling life, because instead of constantly logging things or constantly answering the same questions, they'll be uplifted to be able to do more interesting tasks. So I think you will end up actually with a more skilled and happier compliance workforce.
Well, that is what we all want. Thank you so much, Sarah.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Final trend shaping compliance technology in 2023 is trust. It's a one word, sounds pretty simple, but it's more complex than that. Johnny Skur, one of ClassMatch's senior product managers, is going to tackle this. Johnny?
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, on the surface seems easy, but definitely more complex. As Sarah said, yeah, I'm Johnny. I'm in the product team here. I've been here for ClausMatch for 3 to 4 months now. Prior to that, have kind of 5 years working in product, building out B2B SaaS solutions. So before I start talking about trust and really how it's starting to shape compliance technology, I want to quickly discuss the current state of trust on a global scale. That's between individuals, nations, and organizations alike. Trust is something that has really been put to the test in the 21st century, and probably more so than ever in the last decade than at any other time in kind of mankind's history. There's growing cybercrime. Technological institutions are misusing or mishandling users' personal data. There's large-scale misinformation campaigns that have changed the national and global geopolitical landscape. And especially in the past year, there's been kind of global economic uncertainty, to name kind of a few things. And all this has resulted in an erosion of trust in society to a level we've not really seen before. And it's something that we're all starting to kind of learn to deal with, and in different ways. But how does this really impact compliance? So let's take compliance within financial services, for example, and how the lack of trust in this sector has been brought about by economic uncertainty in the past 18 months. Now, trust in financial services has probably decreased during this time. One reason is that during times of uncertainty, a growing proportion of the public have been experiencing financial hardship and have become more skeptical of financial institutions. Additionally, the instability of last year, and certainly the latter half that we've seen in the UK, has led to a decrease in overall value of investments and money because of ever increasing inflation. And this further causes people to lose faith in financial systems and those governing and regulating them. Now, these factors, more often than not, can lead to reactions from governments and regulatory bodies as well. Now, these are usually imposing more strict operating limits in order to prevent or mitigate the effects of the downturn. So, for example, we could see the government implement stricter regulations on lending practices in order to prevent a credit bubble from forming, or regulations may be put in place to increase transparency and oversight of financial institutions, really in order to better detect and prevent fraudulent or risky behaviour. Now, it's also common for governments to pass new laws or reform existing ones to address issues that have been exposed by a downturn. So, for example, there may be new laws put in place to provide consumer protections, such as regulations on credit card fees or mortgage terms, or laws to protect investors from fraud. Overall, the goal of these regulations and legislations is to promote stability and to protect customers and investors during difficult economic times. Now, this is the government's and the regulators' way of trying to re-establish trust between the consumer and the affected markets and organizations within those markets as well. So why do these actions by governments and regulators impact compliance technology? And one reason is that the regulatory requirements and the standards are becoming increasingly difficult and more complex to navigate. And I think one of the previous speakers has mentioned that kind of in the ever-growing global society, organizations need to be able to demonstrate that they're compliant with these additional requirements in order to maintain their reputation and avoid costly fines. There's pretty much been a story every month or possibly even every week for the past year about more new set of fines being handed out for breaking regulatory legislation, like those handed out to Barclays last month. Additionally, as the business world is becoming more global, organizations need to comply with a wider range of regulations, laws, and standards across multiple jurisdictions. Now, this further increases the need for trust, as organizations need to be able to demonstrate that they are compliant within these requirements in order to maintain their reputation. And finally, organizations are under pressure from stakeholders to be more transparent, more accountable, and more responsible as well. Trust is becoming an important element of compliance technology, as organizations need to be able to demonstrate that they are meeting these expectations from stakeholders. Now, generally speaking, it makes the need to demonstrate one's compliancy to regulation and legislation even more necessary, meaning hopefully that more organizations will have a need or can see a benefit in adopting solutions that can clearly demonstrate that they are trustworthy and that they are operating within legislation and regulation. With this growing need, I think we'll start to see compliance software or compliance technology offer increased transparency, providing visibility into organizations' compliance processes and procedures, allowing individuals to understand how their data is being handled properly and how compliance issues are being addressed within the organization as well. We'll also see improved ease of auditing too. Now, we'll see an increase into integrated third-party auditing, which will demonstrate that organizations are willing and are able to be held accountable at all times for their actions, and that their compliance is in good standing as well. And we'll continue to see further efficiencies in communication, whether that be the introduction of increased automation, communication and notifications, and that can be with stakeholders, customers, regulators, investors, about an organization's compliance efforts. Now, this will help to build trust by demonstrating that an organization is completely transparent and responsive to their stakeholders' concerns. Really, overall, the need for demonstrable compliance is becoming an increasingly important trend in compliance technology in order for organizations to rebuild operational trust with the regulators, markets, and consumers like you and I. Thank you. I realize we're probably running close to time now.
You're all good, Johnny. Thank you so much.
It's okay.
All right, that concludes our webinar. Hopefully you learned a few things today. And before we sign off, I want to again remind you, you can download the 2023 State of Compliance Technology Report that we did put together through ClausMatch. It's through the QR screen on your QR code on your screen. It's super in-depth, it's easy to read, there are visuals, it's really good. So please download it if you can. And like Amanda said, she's going to be sending out a recording of this webinar in case you want to watch it and take some more notes. Thank you everybody for joining.